Welcome, everybody, to this very special episode of Club Fantasy's No Punt Intended. I am Joshua Hudson. We are here to hold ourselves accountable because apparently nobody in the fantasy football industry does this, and we've been doing it for years now. So we're going to start and going back with all of our consensus rankers, minus Chris Molina, who couldn't be here tonight. We're going to take a look at our quarterback rankings heading into the 2022 season. I've said this on numerous occasions. A lot of freaking quarterbacks played football for NFL teams this year. We got quite a bit wrong. Not going to lie and sugarcoat that. But you know what? We got a few things right as we go into all of this. So let's get into this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Welcome in to No Punt Intended. I'm your host tonight, Austin Amandolia, and I am very excited to roast my fellow Club Fantasy mates on their bad takes from the beginning of the year. We'll give some kudos out too, because we should be somewhat kind, but also I'm going to take some heat and we're just going to have a good time. First, I want to introduce our consensus rankers. The five of us that you see on screen, we did rankings for the 2022 season. So you have me, Austin Amandolia, at Austin_FFL on Instagram and Twitter. You've got Josh Hudson, founder of Club Fantasy, at the One Hudsonian. Got Ryan Weisse, my Mock It Like It's Hot co-host at the Fantasy 5. Steve Lawson, hates Patrick Mahomes, at FF by Committee on Twitter. And Steve, are you still on TikTok?
Yeah, I am.
Are you also at FF by Committee on TikTok?
I am. That one's kind of inactive at the moment, but it will fire up again. So
okay. Well, my Instagram's kind of inactive too at the moment, so I get it. You know, we've been there. And then finally, at Joel Wirth, at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. Joel, our zero RB truther and lover of the Packers. Joel, how you doing after that loss?
Doing okay? Rough. Very rough. It was. I didn't have a voice for a couple days, but you know we're getting over it. We're moving on to 23, as Bill Belichick would say.
There you go.
And as Josh mentioned, another of our consensus rakers, Chris Molina. He cannot be with us tonight, but you can find him on Twitter at ChrisMo2413. Quick introduction of the show. Like Josh mentioned, we did preseason rankings, and we're going to look back at those and check our misses and our hits. There's no real format. I've pulled together some questions, and we're going to just go through those. One note that I want to point out ahead of time, Club Fantasy standard scoring assumes 6-point passing touchdowns. So when we're talking through rankings, keep that in mind. If they're a little bit different than what you expect, it's because we're looking at 6-point pass touchdowns.
You know why this is? I want to make sure everybody's on the same page here.
Sure,
Do
go for it.
Touchdowns not count for 6 points in real NFL games? Okay, just putting that out there, guys. This whole 4-point per passing touchdown thing, I've never fucking understood it. It makes zero sense to me. Continue.
Fair. If you want to go back to the 90s, where I came from, it used to be 3 points per passing touchdown.
Oh, I didn't.
This
know
is
that.
progress.
Do you get points? Do you get points for receptions?
Back in those days, you used to have to carve it on stone, so they wanted to make everything 1, 2, or 3 points because it was just easier to check.
There you go.
This is true.
Damn. All right, starting hot.
Austin and I were in the cradle at that point. I just want to let everyone know.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Last introduction before we get into our rankings. Josh, do you want to introduce our sponsor?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we do have sponsors here for this show. This is fantastic.
Look.
Yeah, there you go.
The host.
Let me pull this one up really quick. No, damn it, not that one. Shit. Hang on. Where is it? There it is. I had to get the new flag going. Okay, cool. So this special episode of Club Fantasy's No Punt Intended, presented by Manscaped. Yes, this has been a nice little partnership that we've worked out over the last couple months. Ryan and myself and our normal NPI host, Joe Zolo, were all gifted the perfect package 4.0, which has been honestly, it's been great to use. It includes the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver groin deodorant, the Crop Reviver toner, the Performance Boxer briefs, and a very unique and awesome looking travel bag to hold all of those goodies. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. We highly think that you should. Wow, I just completely lost my words there as I'm going through and reading a script and trying.
How much pressure on Josh tonight?
I'm so completely forgot we were doing these reads tonight, so I'm just kind of going with it. But here's really what you need to know: the products are absolutely fantastic. They work great. The blades on the trimmers are all waterproof, so it's easy to clean, very easy to use and store. So head over to manscaped.com, use promo code CLUBFANTASY at checkout. Save yourself 20% off and get free shipping. This makes for a great, hey, you're heading into Valentine's Day, right? Guys need gifts too. Just saying. Go buy the favorite guy in your life some fun little goodies. The boxer briefs are great and comfortable. And who doesn't love ball deodorant? I'm just saying, when your junk smells great, it works. Just throwing that out there. Manscaped.com. Use promo code CLUBFANTASY. Save 20%. Get free shipping. Manscaped.com. Austin, there you go.
Great. Thank you. And I would just say, if you have been using a beard trimmer for your below the waist grooming, stop it, because it is awful.
You're an adult.
A quality razor is just exactly what you need. It'll change your life. I promise. With that
was a weird opening, guys.
How we do it? You haven't even been here for the worst of it.
That was a lot to take in. For my first podcast back at it, that was a lot to take in. There was a lot of information about you guys that I didn't know.
I guess,
a lot of ball talk to start the show.
A lot of ball talk. So
hey, we're here to talk ball, okay? Just deal with it.
A shocking development that there are only 5 men in this podcast and no women.
So
that's okay. We do those reads with women on the show too.
We do. Super fun.
For the ball talk we all came here for.
Yeah.
Consensus quarterback rankings. So a look back to our 2022 preseason quarterback rankings. We're just going to get right into it. Our consensus QB1 was Josh Allen. And I'll say, I feel pretty good about this one. This might be the most accurate consensus ranking we had out of every other quarterback. From there, it kind of falls apart.
Definitely was not.
QB2 was Justin Herbert. We will get to him. Next up, Patrick Mahomes, QB3. That was pretty good. Would have been probably QB2 if it wasn't for Steve bringing down the weight there. QB4, we had Lamar Jackson. He's kind of an interesting case, dealt with injuries. QB5, Kyler Murray. QB6, Jalen Hurts. 7, Joe Burrow. 8, Tom Brady. Remember when we thought of him as a QB1?
Yeah.
QB9, this is my favorite one. Russell Wilson. QB10, Dak Prescott. QB11, Trey Lance. We're not talking about him. Doesn't count. He went out in week 2. Really complicated my dynasty season, but hey, we prevailed. And then QB12, Derek Carr.
I mean, he's finished at QB 16. It's not
I was going to say
that far off.
A season that kind of fell apart over the last 3 weeks.
Did you ever feel comfortable starting Derek Carr?
Yes.
I mean, in 2 QB leagues, sure.
Yeah.
I want a fantasy championship with Derek Carr as a starting quarterback. So I have to say
I was going for it. I would have started Carr over Herbert if they didn't fire him. Champion.
Yeah, that sucks.
Okay, so I'm gonna take my heat early because I want to get all of that out of the way, and then I want to dish it out the rest of the night. So we're gonna start with the same player that I actually started our ranking show with when we did quarterbacks, and that was Aaron Rodgers. And I know, Joel, it's not a good time to be talking about the Packers, but Aaron Rodgers, man, I came after y'all because he was outside of our consensus QB1 rankings after having never finished outside of the top 10 as a fantasy quarterback. And I just thought that was wrong. We had him ranked as the consensus QB15, and he ended up as QB13. So he even outperformed. He did outperform y'all. I was right about that, but he was not quite a QB1 this year. Points per game, though, was even worse. He was QB23 on a points per game basis. So some of his success in being QB13 was just the fact that he played all 17 games. So, Ryan, I'm going to actually let you start us off on this because you are our most accurate ranker on Aaron Rodgers with him at QB12. So, ready for you to dish out some heat.
I don't even have heat. Basically, I'm going to just kind of give a behind the scenes of what we were talking about before the show started, because for those who are, considering getting into fantasy ranking or fantasy projections, this is one of those things where, and Josh and I talked about this a little bit last night, with quarterbacks, everybody tends to over project if you do projections. So this is kind of one of those things where I lucked into the right ranking, because if you look at the numbers I had Rodgers going for, I had him 500 yards over. I had him at 32 touchdowns. I technically had him at 34 touchdowns with rushing touchdowns. I only had him at 5 interceptions. None of those things happened. And I was pretty damn close on his attempts, but with me having the attempts only off by 10 or 12 attempts, he still threw for 500 fewer yards. And I was just kind of digging into that when you kicked it over to me. He averaged, I think it was 6.8 yards per attempt, if I don't have it right in front of me, but something like 6.8 yards per attempt. I had him at 7.4. So like it doesn't sound like a lot. That's an enormous gap over 500 attempts. And so I kind of just fell in. I lucked into it here where I over projected all quarterbacks, but I thought they were going to have a pretty competent offense. They really didn't. He had games where they shined, at least in the passing game. The lack of weapons. What's funny is at QB13, I more agreed with you at the beginning of the season, Austin, that like I was probably too low on him, but I thought it was the lack of weapons. So from a pure ranking standpoint, putting him at QB13 felt right for me because I kind of look at it as a 12-team league, and he was the first quarterback I didn't want to touch in a 12-team league. And so it kind of worked out well for me here. But when I compare it to my projections, it just leaves me with even more work to do. So the moral of the story is you could be very wrong and accidentally be right. So lean into that.
I love it. Joel, I do want to come to you because you are a resident Packers fan. And so you're the most likely person in here to have watched a lot of Aaron Rodgers this season.
All of
what
it.
do you think? Oof. So what do you think was the biggest factor in him having his first season outside the top 10?
He was bad. If you want to be someone who discounts analytics, this is your test case. Yeah. Because PFF loves him. Football Outsiders, the DVOA likes him. Go look at him throw passes this year, and he was bad. There's just no two ways about it. The analytics are wrong. He was bad. It's not a weapons thing. He had weapons. He was missing throws left and right. He was making bad decisions left and right. He had a bad year. Bottom line, the offense did him no favors. The line was bad early on, but it settled in and was okay. He was bad. He was not. I mean, he made a living for years on just being able to escape the pocket and throw lasers on the run. He could not do that this year. The deep ball was a mess. I mean, there were so many times he had open receivers downfield and missed them by 5-10 yards. I mean, throws that were not even close. He was not good. He was not deserving of Inner Circle Hall of Famer title. He was not deserving of 2-time defending MVP. He was bad, bottom line. And he deserves the numbers. Yeah, 6.8 yards per attempt is brutal, and he looked it all year long.
Yeah, it's almost like a quarterback that predicates his entire scheme around timing. Decided, you know what, my receivers need to figure out how to get on page with me versus, you know what, I need to work with these young guys and learn the things that they do so that we can get on the same page. Because that's really what it was. Rodgers was still doing what he does, in my opinion, throwing where he wanted the player to be. Just the players weren't there. The defenders were there, hence the spike in the interceptions this year.
Yeah, that was the one that really got me because that was my bigger case for Aaron Rodgers is if you were in a league that gives you -4 points for interceptions or any kind of extra penalty for I thought, Aaron Rodgers, he threw for 4 interceptions the prior year. And
he should have been the safest Scott Fishbowl quarterback ever.
Right. And he had 12 interceptions this year, which was bonkers. 3 by the same Detroit Lion, which I thought was very, very comedic. Sorry, Joel. The other thing,
it's well earned. I mean, it's earned. He He threw 3 picks in a game against Detroit. That's a game they should have won. He actively cost them that game in Detroit. And there's no two ways about it. And if you look at their wins, I mean, the whole thing when they were 4-8, and do we put in Jordan Love or we mathematically eliminated all that? What game did Aaron Rodgers lift them to a win in? Dallas, maybe. Other than that, what other game did he carry them to a win? There was none. There was no other game that he single-handedly carried them. So I said a long time ago, I said the worst case scenario at 4-8 was that they win these, they win out and miss the playoffs. It's exactly what happened. They had a weak schedule, and they needed to get Jordan Love in there and get him some time. And this was the worst case scenario for this team.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. What are we doing about Aaron Rodgers next year?
Who does he play for?
Hopefully he just rides off into the sunset and we never have to talk about him again.
He's playing for someone else.
I think he comes back.
I don't think he's going to come back to the Packers. I think he'll wind up somewhere that he thinks he can go get another Super Bowl just because he's a spiteful dude. Like, Aaron Rodgers is like the most spiteful person I've ever seen in my life as an NFL quarterback. Like, his whole mission this year, I felt like, was to tank the Packers and be just bad enough that they weren't good, but just good enough that they weren't terrible. And like, he'll go to like the Jets, right? And like be like, oh look, I'm still Aaron Rodgers. Like, look what I can do with like some talent around me, right? And then they'll get bounced in the first round. And for some reason, the San Francisco 49ers will transfer to the AFC that year and bounce Aaron Rodgers right out of the playoffs again, like they always do, which would just be poetic. I'd love to watch him just lose to the 49ers again. I can't stand Aaron Rodgers. If I met Aaron Rodgers in person, I would tell him to his face, I cannot stand Aaron Rodgers. Like, he is the worst person.
Austin, I have a question for you because you were kind of the advocate for Trey Lance, and I know we weren't going to talk a lot about him on the show, but the rumors are Brady or Rodgers to San Francisco, and then you have the immense well play of Brock Purdy to end this season. What do you see happening with San Francisco just as an offshoot with Aaron Rodgers?
That is such a damn good question. I don't like.
I was like, "You gonna answer it?"
And he's like, "And moving on."
I just I haven't processed the fact that Trey Lance has been injured since that happened, because it was just like, oh my gosh, this happened so early in the season. I mean, I think Trey Lance is still going to be a starting quarterback somewhere. I feel like he has shown just enough that there's like a potential there for a quarterback hungry team. I think what's interesting about it to me is more from an NFL perspective, and I don't want to get too down that rabbit hole, but they traded 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance, and then Brock Purdy can successfully run their offense. And so it just it brings into question the team building strategy there. But from a fantasy perspective, I just don't know. It's going to just depend on the offseason. I would try to sell Trey Lance in Dynasty if I can, but I don't know that anybody's going to take him right now. And so best bet is to stash and hope he ends up in a good situation. I think you bet on the athleticism.
That was such a weird move because Jimmy Garoppolo had gotten them to Jimmy Garoppolo got them to a Super Bowl. They lost really in the fourth quarter. It's not like they were blown out of the water, right? And then they're like, you know what we need to do is trade the world and go get a guy who needs an entire season to fix his throwing motion. That made no sense.
Half of casual fans have no idea who he is.
But also the thing is, we always say, you can't predict injuries. And so if we're going with that mentality here,
but you don't do that when your quarterback got you to the Super. It's not like Garoppolo blew the Super Bowl for them, right? Kyle Shanahan blew that Super Bowl for them. That's the bottom line. Just like Kyle Shanahan blew the Super Bowl for Atlanta. That's the truth.
You can also make the argument, though, that Jimmy Garoppolo was the one that contributed to them losing the NFC Championship the year before, which is why they traded up to get Lance. He had several opportunities to get him.
But imagine you're all right, I got to the NFC Championship game. I had a bad game. We lost. The next year, you're I got us to the Super Bowl. I had a half-decent game, but we lost. and the team looking and going,
If
you're
not
the
winning,
guy.
you're on a short leash. I mean, that's
But
really how
that's
it
not
goes.
not winning. That's like not beating one team. That's coming in second. Like he didn't come
Exactly.
in
You're the
16th.
first loser.
Like,
Continue.
like he didn't come in 16th. Like, oh, I don't know.
You're not
Aaron
first or
Rodgers
last.
was.
Did y'all not listen to Ricky Bobby?
All right. Aaron Rodgers,
Shake and bake.
Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees are the kings of being really good in the regular season and putting up
Yes,
real,
but what do they have?
real
They
mediocre.
have the ring. They have a ring.
A ring. One.
Outside of Tom Brady and a few backup quarterbacks, who has multiple rings?
I you know what? Don't even get me on this Drew Brees thing because I think Drew Brees is the number one most overrated quarterback of all time, and
I'm not
Aaron Rodgers
disagreeing
is a
with you on
close second.
Okay. So back to my point about Trey Lance not predicting injuries. Could you imagine this offense right now if Trey Lance was healthy? And I think like that is my thing with betting on the
he's not good
athleticism
either.
is that Trey Lance, his ability to run the ball, and he is an effective passer. We saw it in the opening week. He's able to get the ball to his receivers. I imagine an offense with Trey Lance, Christian McCaffrey, and Deebo Samuel, and that offense is pure money.
Based on what? Based on what? Trey Lance literally has like a rocket arm and no idea what to do with it. They've literally given a kid a keys to the candy store and is just going to run wild and have no idea what to do.
I love that.
What's the difference between him and Justin Fields?
I love that 9 times out of 10 Czar's emojis don't work, but the popcorn emoji works perfectly.
Like, what? I just don't understand this Trey Lance love. Like, honestly, there was a year in college where he did not throw an interception, which to me almost screamed luck because somewhere along the way, something should have bounced off someone's hands and fallen into a defender's arms, right? Like,
this is
what
also
did we see
coming
from
from
Trey Lance in college? Even watching his tape, they're like, look at this highlight, and it's like, oh, there's a guy standing by himself in the end zone for about 30 yards. It's like that's not skill. I can do that. Like,
I don't think he was drafted based off of what he did in college. Like they
but you should be, right? Like, don't you think to some degree? You went to, what did he go to? Like South Dakota State?
Yeah.
North Dakota State.
North Dakota State. Do you know how many people are in North Dakota? About 15. So, like,
hey, that's Christian Watson's alma mater. Come on now.
Yeah.
Christian
Also,
Watson had 3 good plays.
Super Bowl champ Carson Wentz.
Super Bowl champ sat on the bench. Like,
He was hurt.
Watch Nick Foles win the.
It was
If
his
he was in that
MVP
Super Bowl,
season.
if Carson Wentz was in that Super Bowl, they lose. They lose.
This is why Austin didn't want Trey Lance brought up.
Trey Lance is a mirage. That's what Trey Lance is.
You can't say that yet because
because he's not good. I watched him play. He's not good.
What's
He's
the
played
difference
like
between
4
Trey
downs.
Lance and Justin
That's it.
Fields? There is no difference between Trey Lance and Justin Fields.
Justin Fields at least showed he could throw the football against elite talent.
No,
No,
he
he didn't.
didn't. I am sorry. Justin
played
Fields
at
did
Ohio
not
State.
show.
He played
He
at Ohio
showed he
State.
could run like Michael Vick. That's all he's shown.
Oh my God, he played at Ohio State. Trey Lance played.
You're
at
talking
Wirth
about college.
Community
We're talking about the
College.
pros here.
I'm talking about the pros.
There's a very different level
Trey
of
Lance was a
competition.
community college
If
quarterback.
Trey Lance's college tape doesn't matter, then Justin Fields' college tape doesn't matter either.
Correct.
No, because he's playing against real players who actually got drafted.
But here's
Trey
the
Lance
thing.
played against guys who are like greeting people at Walmart.
I just don't know that you want to. I don't
played
know that you
one
want to
game
go
in 2
with what
years.
we've seen from.
I'm
Justin
pretty sure I
Fields
saw
throwing
Trey
the-
Lance's like #1 cornerback. I think he served me at the Waffle House. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, that's what these people are doing. Like, they're your accountant. You don't want your #1 pick to have been throwing against people who are you like.
No,
are
they're Joe Zolo's
accountant.
accountant. They're not my accountant.
Yeah.
Or like
Lose
like,
Zola.
you don't want that. Like, these people like had dreams outside of the NFL. They're like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to school and get my master's degree. Anyone who's on their mind of like, I'm going to get my master's degree instead of like, I'm going to join the NFL when you're playing at a high level of football, you're not good.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a different quarterback now. I really wish I had signed into StreamYard so I could like mute Steve when he's throwing off bad takes about Trey Lance. So the second quarterback that I wanted to discuss tonight is, this was a collective miss by the fantasy community, I think. And if any of you actually know someone who is like down on this player, please tell me who that person is because I want to follow them and just trust their advice moving forward. Russell Wilson. He was freaking awful.
That bum.
Finished QB 17 overall, which I'm very surprised about. I think that's a little bit inflated by a couple of games down the stretch. But on a points per game basis, he was QB 23. all of us except for Joel had him as a QB1 candidate. And even Joel had him as QB13. So it was kind of like a fringe starter, a weekly streamer. And I feel like if you were in a one quarterback league, you did not feel comfortable streaming Russell Wilson. Steve, you had him the highest at QB4.
I know. So I'm ready to like fucking swallow this sword. Let me say, another guy who I can't fucking stand now is Russell Wilson. Honestly, Pete Carroll should win coach of the fucking millennium. Because, like, this man, he must have the best offensive system on the planet. I cannot believe that Russell Wilson went from what he was, which was pretty good, threw a nice deep ball, the whole blah, 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 to, like, he looked like he was looking at a football like, what is this? Like, he had no idea what he was doing at all. Like, you can blame Hackett all you want, but Russell Wilson couldn't make throws. He could not make throws. Russell Wilson looked like he just tapped out. He like signed his extension and was like, I'm going to go say cringe shit and fucking like jerk off in the locker room, because it was the stupidest fucking season I've ever seen in my entire life. This was an absolute embarrassment of football Russell Wilson put on display. That was awful. Awful. He should be kicked out of the league. He should be forced to repay whatever bonus he got. It was so bad. He got people fired. He cost people their jobs.
To be fair, Nathaniel
Cortland
Hackett
Sutton may never smile again.
Yeah,
Cortland Sutton may never smile again. Like, this, like, legitimate problems with what Russell Wilson did. And then he dared to get on TV and be like, Broncos country, let's ride. The only thing they want you to ride is your fucking car out of town. That's what they want you riding. Like, get out of here with that.
So through week 12, Russell Wilson was quarterback 23, just behind Andy Dalton. Like, that is where we were at for most of the season. And so until the fantasy playoffs, he was not relevant. You probably dropped him before you made it to the playoffs. I want to talk a little bit about like lessons we can take from this. Like, what do we think happened here? Is Russ falling off? Is he just like declining as he gets older? Or was it the fact that he was in a new system that he hasn't run before? Josh, I want to come to you to answer this question first of what you think accounted for Russ's fall off this season.
Well, his deep ball has been shaky for the last few years, in all honesty. And it got to a point where he didn't trust like the separation aspect, because like Cortland Sutton's, he's a jump ball guy. He's a 50-50 guy and not really known for his separation. And you kind of saw these stretches, especially when Judy was out a couple games, where if the wide receiver couldn't separate, he wasn't targeting them. Because in the early part of the season, he had zero issue throwing into those situations, but it wasn't resulting in anything. And you could just see his confidence from here all the way down to here when he was on the field. And I think that's really where it all kind of came to fruition. Hackett's play calling was just terrible. And again, he rightfully deserved to get fired as a result of this season as a whole. But I don't think that what we saw this season from Russ is what we're going to get for the next, 2-3 years from Russ. I think a new, offensive coordinator, head coach that comes in there can work with him to figure out the deficiencies in his game right now and work a system around what he can still do. Obviously, losing Javonte Williams and Gordon's fumble problems definitely didn't help. Their offensive line play wasn't great. Judy had a career season. Kudos to him. But everything else in that offense was just nothing. And, I think to me, especially in Dynasty, like, I'm willing to throw out flyer offers for Russ because he's not going to be any cheaper, in all honesty.
Yeah. So, and obviously, you're talking super flex there.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the Broncos in general. You had all the hype around Alberto. They're done with him. Josh, you brought up such an interesting point, or maybe it was Joe, that when Javonte Williams was the starter, they couldn't wait to get Melvin Gordon involved. When Javonte Williams goes down, then Melvin Gordon gets thrown to the back burner and eventually cut. Like, the decisions. And then I was super bothered when they traded Bradley Chubb. And Josh, you brought logic to the argument of they weren't going to be able to re-sign him, so why not get something out of him? But like, at that point, you're just telling your team we're done. Like, and I understand one guy isn't it, but one guy was it for that defense because they didn't have much of a pass rush outside of Bradley Chubb. They were really just depending on their
Well,
secondary.
especially, I mean, Randy Gregory was on IR most of the season.
Exactly. And so there were so many problems with the team in general to where I agree with everything Steve says up until saying he's a fraud. I don't think he's elite. Let me be perfectly clear. I don't think he was ever elite in Seattle. I think he worked the system perfectly. And Josh, that's where I agree with you. It needs to be the right system. And we've debated this forever. Sean Payton, who, again, Steve, I agree with something you said, Drew Brees, kind of overrated, especially with the height issues and playing behind the tall offensive line issues and the kind of things that Russ needs to kind of like get around, because Russ is not a very tall guy either. Sean Payton going there could light a fire under Russ, because that's the kind of mentorship you need.
Right, but the problem with Sean Payton going there, everyone wants to talk about this. Sean Payton loves to throw inside the numbers. The whole thing with Sean Payton's offense is put it in between the numbers. Russell Wilson cannot see in between the numbers because he's about an inch shorter than I am, and I'm short as shit. So, like...
If Drew Brees can do it, Russell Wilson can do it. Drew Brees literally had to tilt his head.
As much of an overhyped quarterback Drew Brees is, he's significantly better than Russell Wilson. Geno Smith just went and broke Russell Wilson's records.
Well, the offense changed completely.
Geno Smith, who got cold clocked by his own player, just wiped Russell Wilson right out of the history books in Seattle. Like as if he was never there.
Until Geno wins a Super Bowl, Russ is still in the history books in Seattle.
No, people will always hate Russ in Seattle now. He threw that interception against the Patriots. He might as well have signed his own death warrant to everyone in Seattle. He blew up the Legion of Boom. He became like a whole thing. Russell Wilson he's not it.
I do think, though, one of the things that, well, I'm maybe not a stan, but I'll give him a chance. One of the things that was interesting to me about the Broncos this season is early in the season, I remember like the first 3 weeks, they would run out these plays for like a drive at a time where they would use a lot of heavy personnel. They'd have 2 or 3 tight ends in the lineup, and they would get those tight ends involved in the pass game. And it was like a different tight end. Like there was like a 4th string tight end. I was like, I never heard of him. I was pissed that Alberto wasn't getting targets, but the offense looked good. It looked functional.
Yeah, that was when it was Andrew Beck and
yeah. But it worked. And so there's clearly a way to run the Broncos that I think can unlock Russ a little bit more. And I think, to me, that's kind of one of the takeaways from this year. There were a lot of quarterbacks in new systems, and I wanted to list out several quarterbacks in new systems. And it's interesting because some of these quarterbacks underperformed and others overperformed. And I think there's some lesson to be learned here based on what we might see this upcoming offseason. So Russell Wilson changed systems. Kirk Cousins ended up in a new system. I feel like he had a better season than he has the past couple of years. Daniel Jones, new system. He was much better. Tom Brady maybe fits in this category now that Todd Bowles was taking over the head coaching duties.
It's still the same offensive coordinator.
Yeah, same OC.
Your play calling itself was probably a little different, but the system was the same.
Trevor Lawrence, complete overhaul. Tua Tagovailoa, I know he didn't get to play the whole season, but when he was playing, when he started on a Pittsburgh, he was great.
He was a monster.
Justin Fields, midway through the season, they decided, hey, we're going to start running the ball, and he became incredible. Mac Jones, whatever offensive nonsense is happening in New England right now, tanked his value. And then finally, Derek Carr, and I threw Derek Carr in here mostly because of Devontae Adams, not because the system changed, but because the personnel changed so significantly.
The system changed too.
And he had a decline in that. Oh yeah, that's right. Josh McDaniel started there last year.
Whole
too.
new system.
Yeah. And he had a decline. So we saw that the system that a quarterback was playing in was a big factor here. Joel, I want to give you a chance to jump in on this before we move to our next player. If you have anything to add about Russ.
I will say that Russ has kind of always been an outlier in his size, and I think you kind of see this kind of throughout sports, but like especially in baseball and I think in football too, when these outliers, they can have kind of elite careers, but when the end comes, it comes quick and it comes hard.
That's a really good point.
And I think that I think this is I mean, last year we looked 21, he had a finger injury and then he came back and he was brutal. He was just as bad as he was this year, but that was the finger. It's the finger. He rushed back. Maybe that was the end. Maybe we just didn't see it. And we tried to make excuses for him. And this may be it. I would not want to be a Denver fan right now. They're locked into a brutal contract for a long time.
Saddled with a bad contract.
I like that take, Joel. I think that we'll have to see how this pans out next year, because that could be the takeaway from this. Last note on Russ. The most brutal thing about this, I took him with the 203 in Scott Fishbowl.
Oof.
And I thought I had gotten myself a steal. And well, something got stolen.
Come to think of it, I may have as well.
I think a lot of people did, frankly. Yeah. So next up, we're going to talk Dak Prescott. And I'm going to come to Josh first, because as the resident Eagles fan, I'm like looking at this now. I'm like, man, you had so much faith in Dak Prescott. And Josh, you had Dak Prescott ranked above Jalen Hurts this year. Explain yourself to Eagles Nation.
Well, a lot of it is because Dallas is going to throw the football a lot more than Philly. I severely underrated the Eagles pass attack this year. I'm just throwing that out there. Look, Jalen Hurts did his thing. He got better as a passer. He worked on it. And kudos to him. And as an Eagles fan, I'm elated with what I've seen. The way that Kellen Moore has called plays the last couple of years, the Cowboys were going to come out and they were going to sling it. I don't know how different Dak's year would have been if he doesn't get hurt, but from the whole perspective, I mean, points per game, Dak was still a top 10 quarterback. Yeah. Or top 11, excuse me. So was I off? Yes, but I wasn't as far off as I think a big deal is being made. But they ran the ball significantly more than I thought they would. But I think the biggest, knock on Dak this year has been the interceptions, which really have not been there in the past. He is just like, he's seeing Cowboys everywhere, even if they're wearing different jerseys right now. And it's not great for his game. They've seemingly overcome a lot of these turnovers because he tends to get them over with early in the game. And that's it. Then they just ride it off. They keep throwing. CeeDee Lamb has been a target hog for him in this offense. Dalton Schultz missing some time, but he's been bouncing back in terms of targets. They've gotten Tony Pollard involved, but I don't think he's been as involved as they kind of talked up in the offseason. And Michael Gallup just really hasn't progressed from that injury, from the knee injury, the way that I think a lot of us had maybe hoped that he would have. So I think that alone has put more pressure on Dak to make the plays. Whereas in years past with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and a healthy Gallup, the game has been able to come to him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they were severely lacking weapons. That's exactly the point I was going to bring up. Dalton Schultz didn't have the explosion that I was expecting. Michael Gallup took forever to get back on the field. James Washington, who was kind of a pretty hyped up thing, took forever to get back on the field, and then they didn't even use him when he did come back, which means
because they had T.Y. Hilton.
Well, he's worse than T.Y. Hilton off the streets. He's worse than Kevontae Turpin. Like, these are the players that are like, fuck you, James Washington. We want nothing to do with you. So I think, and not that Amari Cooper went to Cleveland and lit the world on fire outside of a few games, I think the loss of Amari Cooper hurt Dak way more than any of us were willing to say that it was going to. I think we were more worried about Amari Cooper than we were Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I think that's a really good take. And I mean, some of the interceptions were due to the fact that they just didn't have the receiver talent. There was with the game against Jacksonville where they lost in overtime on the pick six was a pass to Noah Brown that Noah Brown half caught and popped it up right into a Jacksonville Jaguars defender and returned for a touchdown. Like that's not on Dak. That's on the receiver not catching the ball. And so I agree. I think the receiver talent was part of the issue here. Joel, Steve's about to have a ball with with a segment to himself. So I want to give you a chance to weigh in on Dak before we move into Steve's big hit of the year.
I will disagree with Ryan in that I thought losing Amari Cooper was going to be a big deal.
Okay. Well, no, you're not. You're disagreeing with me from 6 months ago.
Yes. Yeah, and them giving him up for a 5th round pick is absurd. Obviously, is he worth $20 million or whatever he's paying? Probably not, but he's pretty close, and they needed him. I mean, you get Gallup coming back from the injury. Noah Brown is a guy, whatever else they had are just guys. They needed Amari Cooper. I think big picture, I think we need to look at Dak like we look at like mirror image Kirk Cousins, except Kirk Cousins is perpetually underrated and Dak is perpetually
that's why Amari Cooper's not there anymore. Right?
They're the same guy. I mean, they're legitimately they're the same guy.
Wasn't it Amari Cooper who called him Black Kirk Cousins or whatever? And
I believe so. Yeah,
fight in the locker room. Yeah, so.
But they're really the same guy. So we need to look at Dak. We need to stop looking at him as kind of that second tier fantasy quarterback and know that he's pushed down into that kind of middling tier.
Especially because he's not running the way that he used to.
Right.
Like, yeah. I mean, his first 3 years in the league, he had 18 rushing touchdowns, quite literally 6 rushing touchdowns every single season. I think he has 6 total in the last 3 years. Like, he just really has not been running at all. And that value is just going like this. So he needs to throw for 46, 47, 4,800 yards and 35 touchdowns.
And you need elite wide receivers to do that. Like multiple.
Exactly. And he only has 1 right now.
Yeah. Rough season for Dak Prescott, but hey, he did actually get me to a championship in a league. Like you said, Josh, he was still pretty good on a points per game basis. It's also, I forgot that he missed time. Like it's been so long since he was hurt.
4 weeks.
He missed several weeks and still he did all right. But
as I mentioned with the rushing, I mean, I projected them out for 456 rushing attempts. They blew that away by almost 80. Like they ran the ball significantly more than they have in the last few years.
Yeah.
Big emergence of Tony Pollard.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, as we transition to the next quarterback we're going to discuss, if you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. We need 1 more subscriber to hit 500, and then we're giving away a signed jersey. More on that later. But next, we're going to talk about Justin Fields, because there was one person on Twitter that I think was louder about Justin Fields than anyone else, at least in my feed. And obviously the algorithm has bias for people that I follow. Steve, you ranked Justin Fields as QB5, and we definitely gave you hell about it. And, he didn't quite make it to QB5 in 6-point passing touchdown leagues. He finished QB9, but still, you were high on him. You were more right. Just for context, Josh ranked him as QB18, Ryan QB22. I ranked him as QB21, and Joel had him at QB21. So Steve was the only one of us that had the faith in Justin Fields to be a QB1 this year. So Steve, take your victory lap.
I wanted to be humble about this. I really did. And then I thought about it. And then I thought about the offseason. And then I thought about how I got like texts from Josh, and he was like, I should just fire you now for putting him so high.
I never said that.
And then I saw what Joel's wearing as a t-shirt, and I just want to quote the biggest wrestler on the planet. Acknowledge me. Acknowledge me. I am the head of the table now. Justin Fields. All right, so here was my idea behind Justin Fields. I knew Chicago was going to be an absolute crapshoot of an offense this year because they had no one to throw to. Yeah. Now, I will own that I had a bad take that when it came to Chicago that I thought Darnell Mooney was going to pop off with them. But my thought was somebody has to do something, right? It's still an NFL offense. Someone's going to score points. And it's probably going to be Justin Fields because they're going to look around, and I hate David Montgomery. Like, I am just absolutely out on David Montgomery as a talent because I really think he's just, like, he's not good. He's not good. He's bad. He's slow. He's not good at breaking tackles. Can't catch the ball well. There's nothing special about him. So I figured Justin Fields would eventually get going with the running. And then the early season happened, and I saw the text come in and be like, Justin Fields is bad. Like, we told you he would be bad, blah, 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 blah. And people on Twitter did their little victory lapping, and I was like, okay, all right, let's just wait it out and see what happens. And Justin Fields finally started running the ball, and he might actually be the best running quarterback in the NFL. which is crazy to say with Lamar Jackson being there. It's him or Lamar. And you're going to have to, I think when Chicago gets a real receiver in there, Justin Fields probably should be the dynasty QB1.
Oof.
I think Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen would like to have a word, but
Josh Allen, maybe I'd still put him over Mahomes. If you get a real receiver in there, maybe two, give him an offense. I think Justin Fields, that rushing ability, what he did the second half of the year, you will not get that from anyone other than Lamar Jackson.
How does the wide
not
receiver help that get any better?
Because then he's adding passing touchdowns on
No,
top
he's
of
not.
that.
Did you watch? He's not adding passion. The kid
Who's
can't
he
throw the
throwing
football
to?
right now.
Who is
he can't
throwing
throw the
to?
football right now.
He's fine. He's a good thrower of the football. Honestly, I'm not of
He
that camp.
completed 33% of his passes in the last game of the season, man.
Bruh, I was better than half their receivers on the field. And listen,
here's the thing that blows my mind. Everybody's talking about receivers. He was bottom half amongst quarterbacks, and by bottom half, I mean in the highest number of drop percentage. He was bottom half. It's not that the receivers were dropping the football.
I'm not saying they were dropping the
getting
football.
it to them.
I'm saying that there was no way to get it to them because they literally could not get open at all. At all. There was no separation, no skill, no 50-50 ball to throw. It was just if Justin Fields did not run the ball on that play, it was an absolute busted play. They could not get a guy open. There was no concept that got anyone open. There wasn't a single receiver that was out there that was oh, I'll create a yard of separation. It was as if they were in cellophane wrapping with that cornerback. They were just packaged together and moving throughout the field, and Justin Fields was left to do it on his own. And what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do?
And I concede most of what you said. You had me with you until you put him anywhere near the QB1 in Dynasty. Because the other thing he proved is that when he does have to run, he gets hurt. And so these are the issues you have with mobile quarterbacks to begin with. I think Chicago has a ton of money and they're going to have a very interesting and fun offseason. But I don't know.
You're telling me if DeAndre Hopkins and Chris Godwin wind up in Chicago.
That's not happening.
Why not? It could, right?
If DeAndre Hopkins and Chris Godwin end up in Chicago, Justin Fields will remain around the QB5, and I will tank both of them in my rankings because they will be worthless in fantasy football.
I think both of them skyrocket.
Oh, my God. You're saying that Justin Fields
I think both of them skyrocket Justin Fields.
Oh, okay.
I got a text at the exact same time, and my ADHD was not able to do both things at the exact same time. So I my brain shut off and I was like, this is done. And there's a text.
I just worry
I actually think Chris Godwin could really succeed in Chicago's offense because Justin Fields has shown that he is a middle of the field kind of thrower, right? That's what he seems to like to do more so. And that's what Chris Godwin excels at. I think I have been pitching this trade idea of Tampa trading Chris Godwin and a bunch of firsts to go up and get the number 1 pick. And I think that's kind of where Chris Godwin should land, is somewhere like Chicago, where he is the unquestioned number 1 guy. Darnell Mooney moves to the number 2, potentially number 3, and you have a real offense. We saw a stretch where his passing started to take steps forward. Cole Kmet kind of popped off in the touchdown department. There was stuff going on.
Almost every Cole Kmet touchdown, as a person who has to defend his Cole Kmet take, almost every Cole Kmet touchdown was on a broken play. It was not a designed pass whatsoever.
But we always want to talk about quarterbacks. Why did they have a down year? Was their offensive line bad? Were their wide receivers not as good? Were there injuries on the offense? And if you go down Justin Fields' checklist, it's yes, his offensive line bad. Yes, there was injuries on the offense. Were his wide receivers bad? They were absolutely bad. They would.
But he didn't have a down year. He had the best year of his life.
And he excelled, right? So that's what I'm saying is
because of his running. And I think
that's all that matters in fantasy. That's all that matters in fantasy football is what are you going to get points from? And now rushing is king. And this argument of will mobile quarterbacks get hurt? Every new quarterback coming into the league right now, besides Mac Jones, is a mobile quarterback. They all run. The idea of a mobile quarterback versus a traditional quarterback is over. The traditional quarterback is now a mobile quarterback. Mahomes runs, Allen runs, Lamar runs, Fields runs.
Okay. There's difference between being able to run and being a dual threat quarterback. And if you have questions about quarterbacks entering the league being pocket passers, I would like to introduce you to the 2023 quarterback class, because most of those quarterbacks do most of their damage from the pocket. Maybe they get creative and they get outside the pocket.
You know why
but
everyone
they're
was
not
down
doing
on Justin
design
Fields
runs.
this year? You know why all of you were down on Justin Fields? Because we talked about this, is that he didn't run in college.
Yeah.
So,
Right? And I said, it doesn't
my
matter because he's
transition point.
blazing fast. And everyone was like, what? He didn't do it in college. When you're playing against competition and you have wide receivers that are as good as like Justin Fields had and these guys have, you don't run because they're running wide open. It's easier for you to throw a 50-yard bomb than it is for you to run a 50-yard, like to take off and do a 50-yard run. These guys can still move. CJ Stroud, maybe not as much. He's pretty slow. But like, these guys are going to come out. They're mobile. That's the new prototype for quarterbacks. It is Tom Brady's do not exist. That they're statues. Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, all those kind of guys. Peyton Manning.
That's fair.
No more
There's
statues.
a large difference between Patrick Mahomes' 60 rushes per game and probably 35 sacks this year, and Justin Fields' 160 rushes on the season and probably 40 to 50 sacks this season. Justin
55.
Fields, I'm willing to guess that Justin Fields got hit. Actually hit.
Think of how bad his line has to be that he was sacked 55 times.
No. Sacks are a quarterback stat. Sacks are a quarterback
I was
stat.
about to say, I'm
100%.
gonna pause this
55
really
sacks?
quick. I'm gonna pause this really quick because I was going through and as much shit as I like to give Pro Football Focus, their grading system is based on players doing their job, right? The Bears led the NFL in rushing offense. And I know a lot of that is on the shoulders or the legs, really, of Justin Fields. Their offensive line collectively was a top 6 run blocking unit. Their pass blocking from that offensive line was 16th in the league. Now, I'm going to read this off really quick.
That's better than I thought.
Yeah.
Same. And I'm going to read this off. It's very easy to assume that when a quarterback has quote unquote time to throw, that they're good quarterbacks, right? The top 10 quarterbacks in average time to throw, I want to read off this list and you tell me how many of these players you consider great quarterbacks or even good quarterbacks, okay? I'm going to start at 10. Taylor Heineke. Russell Wilson. Daniel Jones.
I'm sorry. Wait.
Hold on.
Are we? No, I just clarifying. We're talking most time to throw.
Yeah, an average time to throw per drop back. Okay. Daniel Jones, Kenny Pickett, Marcus Mariota, Zach Wilson,
God.
Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold, Deshaun Watson, Justin Fields. Okay.
Again, hold on. I want to clarify what. Okay, so he takes the most time.
He takes the most time.
He takes the longest time to get rid of.
Everyone wants to like stick this on the quarterback as if he's not looking at his receivers, going, "Do something, get open."
Yeah.
Otherwise,
he's
I'm throwing it into a
ball
seam.
too damn long
Because there's nowhere to go with it. There's nowhere to go with it. Like young quarterbacks do this all the time. They and especially guys like it sounds like Lamar kind of does it, and now Justin Fields. When you're so mobile, sometimes you will take those extra sacks. Right? It happens, and it's not a good thing. I'm not defending. He needs to cut down on the sacks he does take that are his fault. But there are, when you're getting sacked 55 times, not all 55 are sitting on Justin Fields' shoulders. There are plays where he's going, we need a play right now, someone get open, and he's standing there looking at his wide receivers that are essentially running with like cement shoes on. They're not getting open. And if your guys aren't getting open on 3rd and 15, you're going to take that sack because you're waiting for that play to open up. Because if you chuck it into the stands, you're still punting. So you're going to wait and try to get that big play.
But the throwaway is better than the sack.
The throwaway is better than the sack.
Yeah, but Joe Burrow, who got sacked a ton last year, said the same thing. He's like, listen, on 3rd down, I'm trying to make a play. If I get sacked, I get sacked with punting anyway.
Okay.
And
I'm going to pivot this
Joe Burrow
so that we can get to Joel's victory lap, but I'm going to get the last say on the Justin Fields thing. The point about time to throw, the thing that concerns me about Justin Fields is early in the season, if you watch him play, there are times where he had receivers open and he did not throw the ball, and he saw the receiver open and still hesitated to throw the ball. That's what scares me. I don't want to give him too much. I don't want to rely too much on those games in my assessment of him for next season. But I do think he needs to take a Jalen Hurts type leap in his passing game next year to maintain this level of efficiency. With that, though, I want to talk about the QB1 from this year, because we're not letting Steve off the hook for the fact that he had Patrick Mahomes ranked as QB12 this year. But Joel was actually the only one of us, I believe. Yes, he was the only one of us that ranked Patrick Mahomes QB1. And my word, Patrick Mahomes just made everybody look foolish for downgrading him this year.
And before Joel goes into it, because I want to give Joel credit as well as someone, Joel's one of the drafters with us on Mock It Like It's Hot every single week. Joel drafted to his word. So I want to give kudos to that as well. If there was a draft, Patrick Mahomes was leaving with Joel.
100%. So Joel, take your victory lap.
Well, I think he's the best quarterback in football. I don't think that's even up for debate at this point. So I don't think it looks like I was really going out on a soft limb.
I was going to say
at all. But,
Joel's like, let me explain.
I think
this
there was a lot of
science.
there was a lot of concern because Tyreek Hill left. That wasn't going to change anything. They were still going to run the same offense. It was just you're distributing the ball differently. And I mean, that's part of why I like Travis Kelce so much, because he became the de facto number one option in that offense. But the offense wasn't going to change. They're still going to chuck the ball a ton. They're still going to throw. They're going to throw to their tight end. They're going to throw to their running backs. Jerick McKinnon had 9 receiving touchdowns. That's insane.
Man, what could have been for CEH if he was actually good and or on the field?
Yeah, he's trash.
What could have been for my dynasty teams that had Travis Kelce and they all lost in the championship game.
I know.
Because Jerick McKinnon just sucked up all his touchdowns at the end of the year, but that's a different story. So I think, but the one thing I want to get to is I think that brings us to a larger point on the Mahomes thing, is that scoring was down this year, down pretty hard. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. Is scoring down because we have bad quarterbacks and the NFL is a quarterback problem, or our quarterbacks down because scoring is down? I think the NFL's got a quarterback problem, and we did the mock draft show on Monday, and I took Patrick Mahomes at the turn, the 12-13 turn. I am not leaving a single quarterback draft without one. If I have to go in the first round to take one of the, Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Burrow. After that, who are you comfortable? Herbert, maybe. He was soft.
I'm never comfortable with Justin Herbert ever.
Right. Yeah. We had him kind of in that elite tier this year. Does he belong there? Does Lamar belong there? I don't know. I am not. I think as much of an advantage as Kelce provides at tight end, I think those 3 or 4 guys provide that same advantage at quarterback. I think you have to have one, especially in one. I mean, it doesn't really change the economy in Superflex, but in one QB this year, I'm going to aggressively go after those top guys.
Phil, you mentioned maybe potentially a quarterback problem. I think it's a coaching problem. There's some really bad offensive coordinators in football right now. Really bad. And we just need to cherish the ones that are actually good and focus on players in those offenses. Because right now, I think there's probably like 7 halfway decent to great offensive coordinators in football.
But I think if you look, and that's a fair point, and I don't disagree with that. But if you look at this year's quarterback class, I'm going to ride or die with Malik Willis until he goes away. But the rest of that class is garbage. There's nothing there. I know, Austin. You're going to give some love to Desmond Ridder. I don't see it. I don't see it with Kenny Pickett.
About Desmond Ridder.
There's nothing in this class, and this upcoming class isn't. I don't think C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young are elite talents. You got Richardson and Levis, who are projects at best. It's an issue. You go back to 21, and you got Justin Fields, who is the next Michael Vick, but he can't pass, and Trey Lance, who is an open book, and Mac Jones, who's exceptionally limited. What in the last 2 or 3 years? I mean, since the Burrow class, it gave us Burrow and Herbert and Tua. And Jordan Love, soon to be Hall of Famer. But since that Since that 20 class, what has come out? I think the NFL has a real quarterback problem.
That's a really interesting take, and I think that has big fantasy implications. If we're buying into that,
as we start to get to the end of the road, because you have Andy Dalton quarterbacking the Saints. These are, when we lost Drew Brees, there was no replacement. We're going to soon lose Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and as Joel kind of hit, there's no replacement outside.
I think the problem is, I don't think it's a talent problem. I don't think it's a talent problem with quarterbacks. I think it's a valuation problem with quarterbacks, is that now teams are blowing multiple early round draft picks on getting quarterbacks, and they're forgetting it's a team game, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Teams didn't trade up to go get Aaron Rodgers. Teams didn't trade up to go get Tom Brady, but Ben Roethlisberger, Peyton Manning were drafted where they were by the team that could have drafted them. The first team that needed a quarterback was the first team that took a quarterback. We're seeing teams mortgage their future for a young quarterback and then having nothing to help him out with. If the Texans were to mortgage everything and go get a stud quarterback, what on earth are they supposed to surround him with if they don't have draft picks? Because I can tell you right now, no one's signing with the Houston Texans over some of these bigger market teams.
They've got Cleveland's picks, so they're okay.
Yeah. This is a great point. This actually transitions perfectly into the last question I have that I do want to get into before we get out of here, which it's a point that's revolving around Matthew Stafford in particular, because he was another collective miss by the fantasy community. We kind of expected him to maintain that mid-tier, bottom end QB1 streaming quarterback performance. He ended up being QB 30 in points per game for quarterbacks with 5 or more starts. And to me, this spoke to the importance of having a good offensive line, because the LA Rams offensive line struggled this year. And if you go through, I went into PFF and pulled up the quarterbacks with the most pressures this year. And I want to go through, I think I did the top 10, but I did enough to get the point home. Number 1, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert underperformed this year. Next was Mahomes, was number 4. Allen's was number 5. They had 241 and 222 pressures. Those two are outliers. They're elite playmakers. They can get creative. Going further down the list, Davis Mills had the 7th most pressures. Davis Mills, he didn't start every game, and
yeah, that's pretty crazy.
And his fantasy value was worse this year than it was last year. Last year, you could have streamed him. You couldn't this year. Russell Wilson was 8th. Justin Fields, 9th. You couldn't pass the ball. Derek Carr was 10th. You get down to 14th. That's where Matt Ryan was. We're not talking about Matt Ryan. It didn't start every game. We're not talking about Matt Ryan, but the problem in Indy was the offensive line. It wasn't the quarterback. Just saying. Jalen Hurts was 15th. Jalen Hurts is also creative. He can escape the pocket. And then this one I thought was really fun. If you combine the pressures of the New York Jets quarterbacks, they had the 5th most pressures. And the only one of them that was worth anything, except for a little Joe Flacco at the beginning of the year, was a little bit of Mike White, and then he tailed off too.
And it was a few games. It was never.
Yeah, it was never sustainable.
Not even. It was one game.
Yeah, it was one game.
Didn't they lose their left tackle right when the season started?
Yes.
Yeah, Becton. Yeah.
I think also with Stafford, he had that injury coming into the season that was Rams were trying to downplay it. He was trying to downplay it. But as we saw with Peyton Manning, when you start to get dead arm, that's a huge problem. It's not a fun thing. It needs surgery to correct. You can't feel your hand. You can't put that same zip on the ball. And Matt Stafford is a big arm quarterback, and all of a sudden he can't do that. Well,
yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. But I think going into next season, the evaluation of offensive lines needs to be a factor when we're thinking about fantasy quarterbacks, because particularly for these pocket passers, if the offensive line isn't there, they're going to struggle. With that, that's all we have for tonight. We're going to be back next week to hold ourselves accountable on our running backs. And I have no idea what to expect from that, because I was just reminded in this episode that Jarrett McKinnon is probably going to be in the top 12. And I don't even know if I ranked Jarrett McKinnon last year.
I think he's in the top 20. Let me see.
So Josh, while you let that up, I am going to throw it back over to you to close out. But appreciate everyone for joining. If you haven't hit that subscribe button already, please hit that subscribe button so we can get to 500 subscribers. And
I
Josh,
think we just got there.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Boom. 500,
Boom.
baby. Boom. Thank you, Willy Nilly. Appreciate you, brother.
Yes.
That boy.
I'll
Also,
throw up the
thanks
ticker
to
real
my-
quick.
also thanks
Go
to
ahead.
my friends, because I had a few friends subscribe last night.
Yes. Thank you, Austin.
Thanks, Austin's friends.
Thank you. All right, well, I didn't see very many of those because apparently they're private profiles. So if they want to get included into the wheel, have them DM me or show me a screenshot of
Or you, Austin.
their subscription, or even you, Austin, and shoot it to me so that way I
Even
can add them
you.
onto the list. So, but I'll throw the ticker down here at the bottom. Just remember, we are presented by Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com, use promo code ClubFantasy, save 20% off, and get free shipping. Appreciate everybody in the chat. And real quick, I do want to shout out, because the biggest surprise of this year, who was the last on your list that we didn't touch on, let's give some love to Geno Smith. That dude came out of nowhere,
Yes.
had an absolutely fantastic season. QB5 overall, QB9 points per game. The highest of anybody that had him ranked was QB30. So just
wait.
awesome year. Awesome year.
One note, one of us had Drew Lock ranked above him, which got me. Yeah.
Well,
Joel had Drew Lock.
Probably
ranked
me.
above
That's
I was
probably
gonna
me.
say, to be fair, like, so I wrote up the Seahawks for football guys, and for half the preseason, I listed Drew Lock as the starter, even though the Seahawks didn't, because you just figured that's what was gonna happen. And
They traded for him, right? Like that
yeah,
makes sense.
exactly. Like you thought. So I mean, it is what it is. Kudos
I didn't
to
even
Geno.
bother ranking either of them. Like, I don't know what's going
There
on.
you go.
Geno
Like,
Smith will start 8 games. Drew Lock will start 8 games. Then some
That's
random will start
exactly
like
what I
the
did,
last
Steve.
one. Like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
oh,
exactly what
fuck
I did.
it. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. So the rest of our schedule, obviously, the more start sit going on Saturdays. We'll be back on Monday morning at 11 a.m. Ryan, myself, and Chris Molina is going to join us. We're going to be recapping the super wild card weekend. Probably a quick preview of the Dallas Tampa Bay game. We'll be back on Wednesday night for the regularly scheduled No Punt Intended. We're continuing our A Look Back series. We're going to go from teams 9 through 16 in the draft order from a year ago. And then we'll be back same time next Thursday, 7 p.m. For the running back rankings accountability. I don't know. I assume all 5 of us will be back, because I know Chris won't. Steve, I think you said your schedule might be up in the air, but
Yeah, I think I'll be here.
okay. So then, yeah, 5 of us again, back for another round of yelling and screaming at each other and holding ourselves accountable. So good times all around.
Love it.
Love it. Great. Well, with that, again, thanks for joining us. And don't forget, defense wins championships. I almost said offense. Defense wins,
Every time.
Ryan flubs it too. It's okay.
Every time.
defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football. Good night, y'all.